Half of what is in this tub was not here 3 days ago, and I bought none of it. Watch, I put my hand in and it comes up heavy, dripping, green the whole way through. That is protein, living protein, grown on rainwater and sunlight in a tub that sits behind my barn and asks almost nothing of me. The hens know the sound of this scoop. Listen to them. This plant is called Azolla. It is a floating fern. It is the same plant I showed you in the 5-plant video, and a great many of you wrote to me afterward asking the same question over and over. Fine, Levi. Now show us how to build it. So that is what this is. Not a list, not a teaser. The whole thing front to back, how to build the tub, what water goes in it, how to feed that water, when to skim it and how much to leave. How to get hens to actually eat the stuff because they will not at first. How to carry it through winter, which nobody seems willing to talk about. And the one mistake you must never make. Not once, not ever. By the time we are done, you will be able to walk out into your own yard and build this today, with what you already have leaning against the shed. And I have no seed to sell you. Nobody does. That turns out to be most of the story. Before we go on, if you keep hens and you are tired of carrying that bag in from the truck, put a subscribe on this. It costs you nothing, and it tells me to keep digging these things up. Now, what is it you are looking at? Azolla is a fern, not a weed, not an algae. A fern, the same family of thing as the bracken along your fence line, except this one gave up on soil altogether and learned to float. And it carries a passenger. Inside the little leaves of this plant there lives a cyanobacterium, a partner. That partner takes nitrogen straight out of the air and hands it to the fern, and in return the fern gives it a house and a meal. The two of them have been doing this so long they cannot be separated. Stay with me, because this is the whole reason the thing works. Nitrogen is what you buy. Nitrogen is the bag. Nitrogen is what makes fertilizer cost money and makes feed cost money, because protein is nitrogen wearing a coat. This plant does not buy it. It pulls it out of the sky for free every hour the sun is up. It carries its own fertilizer factory inside its leaves. That is why it grows the way it does. In warm weather, in decent light, Azolla doubles itself in about 3 to 5 days. Cooler than that and it slows down. Hot as blazes and it sulks. But 3 to 5 days in the season you would actually be growing it, and that is not my number. That is the number the people who measure these things keep landing on. Now let me clear up something before it trips you, because it tripped a good many of you in the comments last time. Azolla is not duckweed. They are not cousins. They are not the same plant with two names. One of them is a fern that carries a live-in fertilizer factory in its leaves. The other is a flowering plant. They just happen to share a puddle, and they look alike from 6 feet up. If somebody sold you a cup of green and told you it was all the same thing, it was not. And here is the whole build in 30 seconds so you have it before we get into the detail. A tub that holds water, set where it gets morning sun and afternoon shade. Fill it with rainwater. Stir in a little composted manure. Float a handful of Azolla on top. Wait. Skim half of it off when it covers the surface and never skim it all. That is the method. Everything after this is me telling you why each of those lines is there and what happens when you get one of them wrong. So the question that ought to be sitting in your chest right now is this one. If this plant is real and it doubles itself in 3 days, and it has been feeding livestock on the other side of the world for longer than this country has existed, then why have you never once heard it named at the feed store? I want to answer that carefully, because there is a cheap answer and there is a true one, and the cheap one insults you. The cheap answer is that somebody is hiding it. Men in an office somewhere, deciding what you are allowed to know. That is not what happened. What happened is quieter and worse, because there is nobody to be angry at. Think about what a feed company actually sells. It sells a bag. And for a bag to be worth making, a few things have to be true about what goes in it. It has to be ownable, so it can be bred and patented and sold back to you next year. It has to hold still, so it can be milled and sacked and put on a pallet and shipped through 3 states. It has to keep on a shelf. And it has to be something you cannot make yourself, or you will stop coming back. Now hold Azolla up against that list. You cannot patent it. It is a wild fern that has been floating on rice paddies for 1,000 years, and it belongs to nobody. You cannot bag it. It is 9/10 water. Ship it wet and you are paying freight on a pond. You cannot make you come back for it. That is the part that finishes it. If I hand you 1 cup of this and you do not kill it, you have it for the rest of your life. It makes more of itself. Forever. There is no second sale. So no company ever built a business on it. Not because they were wicked, because there was no business there. And a thing with no business behind it gets no salesman, no bag with a picture of a happy hen on it, no advertisement, no man at the counter who has heard of it. It does not get buried. It just never gets carried. And after 2 or 3 generations of that, it is gone from memory just as thoroughly as if somebody had hidden it on purpose. That is the honest shape of it. Nobody stole this from you. Nobody stood to make $1 reminding you. And yet it is not obscure to the people who study it. It has been grown on rice paddies across Asia for 1,000 years, deliberately, as a green manure and as feed. Researchers have run it through feeding trials on laying hens and on broilers, and published what came out. It has even been looked at by people working on closed life support systems for space, of all places, because it makes oxygen and you can eat it. And in a sealed room, those are the 2 things that matter. 1,000 years of farmers, a shelf of published trials, and not 1 salesman. That is not a conspiracy. That is just what happens to a plant that refuses to be a product. Right, let us build it. First, the container. And I want to be very plain here because this is the one thing in the whole video I will not bend on. It goes in a container. A closed container that you own, with a rim and a bottom and no way out. A muck tub, a stock tank. A child's wading pool, and those are the ones I would start with, because they cost almost nothing and you can put one anywhere. An old bathtub set on blocks, a feed trough gone out of service. What it will never be is a pond. Not a pond, not a ditch, not the creek at the bottom of your field, not the drainage swale by the road. I will tell you exactly why later on, and when I do, you will understand that I am not being fussy. But I want that seed planted before you go outside and start looking around your place for water. 6 inches of depth is plenty. This plant floats. It is not rooting into anything. What depth buys you is stability so that the water does not cook in an afternoon or go cold overnight. A shallow pan swings too hard. Deeper is kinder. Now the light in this catches most people. Azolla is not a sun worshiper. It wants good bright light and it wants to be spared the hard afternoon of high summer. Morning sun, afternoon shade, under the east side of the barn, beneath a tree that lets some light through. Full blazing sun on a black tub will cook it and you will come out and find a mat gone red and brittle and think the plant failed you. It did not. You put it in an oven. Temperature is the same story told with numbers. This plant likes it about the range you like it. Comfortable. Somewhere between 65 and 80 degrees is where it does its best work. It slows right down as it gets cold, and it starts to suffer when it gets much above 90, which tells you what your season is, and we will deal with winter shortly. Water next. Rainwater if you have a barrel, and this is what I use. Well water is fine. If all you have is town water, fill the tub and let it stand open for a full day before you put a plant in it so the chlorine can leave. It will not hurt you to wait, and it will kill your starter if you do not. Then the part everybody skips, and it is the part that decides whether you get a thriving mat or a sad green ring around the edge. You have to feed the water. Now this plant makes its own nitrogen. We covered that. So what it actually runs short of is phosphorus. Phosphorus is the limiting nutrient in an Azolla tub near enough every time. When people tell me their Azolla stalled out and sat there doing nothing for 3 weeks, it is almost always this. You feed it with what is already on the place. A shovel of well-composted manure from your own flock, put in a feed sack and steeped in the tub like a tea bag. A handful of wood ash off the stove, which carries phosphorus and potash both. That is it. That is the whole fertilizer program, and it is a closed circle. The hens make the manure. The manure feeds the water. The water grows the plant. The plant feeds the hens. I want to be honest with you about that word free because I use it and I do not want to be sloppy with it. There is no bill. Nothing arrives in the mail, but it is not nothing. It is a shovel of manure and a handful of ash and 5 minutes of your week. If you already keep chickens, you already have every bit of that. If somebody tells you it needs absolutely nothing at all, they have not grown it. Now the starter, and here is where I have to give you a warning that I have not heard another soul give. Azolla is not one plant. It is a family, and some of them belong here and some of them do not. There are species native to this continent that have floated on American water for as long as there has been American water. And there is a species out of Asia and Africa, Azolla pinnata, that is on the federal noxious weed list in this country, federally regulated. And beyond that, individual states have their own rules. Alabama, North Carolina, and Vermont listed as a class a noxious weed. California and Oregon quarantine it. Massachusetts prohibits it outright. South Carolina calls it a plant pest. So before you order a cup of green off the internet from a man who does not tell you what he is selling, find out which species it is, and spend 2 minutes finding out what your own state says. Ask for one of the American natives. Any honest supplier will know exactly what you mean, and the one who does not is the one to walk away from. You need very little, a handful. People who have done this describe a starter that would not cover a coin, and 6 weeks later a full tub. It multiplies. That is the entire point of it. Do not let anybody sell you a bucket. Float it on the surface and leave it be. Do not stir it in. Do not push it under. It floats. That is its whole way of life. And then the harvest rhythm, which is the last piece and the one that keeps it alive for years. When the mat covers the surface, skim half of it. Half. Never all of it, and never let it sit there fully matted for weeks either. Skim half and the plant races to close the gap, and racing is exactly what you want. Skim all of it and you have no engine left, and you will wait weeks for a start you could have kept. Let it mat over solid and thick, and it begins to crowd itself. The layer underneath goes brown and rots, and the tub sours. Half twice a week in the warm season. That is the whole discipline. And for lifting it out, one of you gave me the best tip in this entire video, and I am giving it straight back to all of you. Use a cat litter scoop, the slotted kind. The water pours straight out through the slots, and the plant stays in the scoop, and you are not standing there with a dripping colander and wet sleeves. A few dollars, and it is the right tool by accident. Now you have a tub of green. Time to find out what your hens think of it. And I am going to tell you the truth about this, because if I do not, you will try it once and decide the whole thing was a waste of a summer. Your hens will probably not want it at first. I want to be very clear because a lot of videos skip past this part. There is a man who filmed this honestly, put a scoop of fresh Azolla down in front of his flock and they would not touch it, would not go near it. He left it with them and walked off. Came back later and a good deal of it was gone. Next day, they knew what it was and they came for it. That is the normal shape of it. It is not a failure. It is a new food, and hens are conservative creatures, more conservative than any Amishman I know. So do not dump a scoop in front of them and stand there waiting to be proved right. Introduce it the way you would introduce anything. Start small. Mix a little of it into what they already eat so it comes with a smell they trust. If you ferment your feed, and if you watched the last video you may well be doing that now, stir it straight into the bucket. That is the easiest path I know because the ferment already smells like supper to them. Scatter a few sunflower seeds over the top of it. That one came from one of you, and it works on the same principle as everything else in poultry keeping. Make the new thing the price of the good thing. If they are still shy of it, rinse it. Fresh Azolla can carry a bitter edge off the tub water, and a rinse under the tap takes that off. That was another of yours. I have used it. And then there is drying, which is the thing I most want you to hear, because it solves two problems at once. Fresh Azolla is about 9/10 water, which means that when you dry it, the protein concentrates. What you are left with is a light green crumble that is a far richer feed by weight than the wet plant ever was. And here is the part nobody says out loud. A great many hens simply prefer it dry. If yours turn their beaks up at wet green, dry a batch and try again, and you may find the argument was never about the plant. Spread it thin on a screen, somewhere warm and out of the rain, and let the sun do it. It goes crisp in a day or two and crumbles between your fingers. Then into a jar, sealed, dry, and it keeps. Which brings us to winter, and I have not found anybody willing to give you a straight answer about it, so here is mine. Azolla does not overwinter outside in most of this country. It slows as it cools, it stops, and a hard freeze finishes it. That is the truth. Anyone who tells you different is growing it somewhere warmer than you are. So you do this instead. All summer while it is racing, you dry the surplus you cannot feed out. Jar after jar of it put up on a shelf like anything else you put up, and all winter you sprinkle that over the feed. That is the answer. Grow it in the season it wants and store the season. And keep a little of it alive to start again. A small tub in the greenhouse. A tote in a south window with a light over it. One of you wrote to me from Colorado and said they run theirs indoors right through the winter under lights and pass the water on to the garden after. I have not done that myself, so I will not swear to it, but it is a sound idea and I pass it on as theirs. The point is only this. Keep a handful alive somewhere warm, and come spring you never buy a starter again. Now we come to the part I would keep if you cut everything else out of this video. The mistakes. And the first one is not a mistake, it is a law. Never put this plant in open water. Not a pond, not a stream, not a canal, not a ditch, not the drainage at the end of the lane, not the creek that runs through the back of your property and out onto your neighbors. Never. Here is why. Every single thing that makes this plant a gift in a tub makes it a disaster loose in the world. It doubles in 3 days. It floats. It needs nothing from you. Put that on open water with no rim to stop it, and it does the only thing it knows how to do. It covers the surface, all of it. And a covered surface is a dead surface. Light stops reaching the water. The plants underneath die. When the mat itself dies and sinks, it rots, and rotting takes the oxygen out of the water, and then the fish go. There are waterways in the world that have been choked shut by this plant. People have written to me about canals in Africa gone solid with it, farmers pulling it out by the truckload and losing. That is not a scare story I built for you. That is why one of these species is on the federal noxious weed list in this country, and why the states I named earlier have written it into their own law. So the rim of your tub is not a container. It is a border. You keep it on your side of it. And if you are done with a batch, or you break down the tub at the end of the season, do not tip it out on the ground where the water runs. Give it to the hens. Put it in the compost where it will dry and die. Dry it out completely on a slab, but do not pour it into anything that flows. That is the law. Everything else in this list is just a lesson. Second, full sun will cook it. I said it before, and I will say it again here where the mistakes live, because it is the most common way to lose a tub. If your mat goes red and brittle and crisp at the edges, you did not fail to feed it. You baked it. Move it into afternoon shade. Third, do not let it mat over solid. I know it feels wrong to throw green away when the tub finally looks the way you pictured it. Skim it anyway. A mat that is allowed to pile up on itself smothers its own underside. That layer dies and rots, and the whole tub goes sour and slimy, and you will be starting over. Skim half, twice a week. Greed is the mistake here, and it is an easy one to make. Fourth, do not let it freeze wet and walk away expecting it back. It will not come back. Take your starter indoors before the first hard night, not after it. And fifth, and this one I have not heard said anywhere, and it matters more than the rest. Grow it in clean water. This plant is a hyperaccumulator. That is a long word for a simple and slightly unsettling fact. Azolla pulls heavy metals out of the water it sits in and holds onto them. It does this so well that it is deliberately used to clean up contaminated water. That is a documented job it does. Which means that whatever is in your water ends up concentrated in the plant, and the plant ends up in your hens, and your hens end up on your table. So rainwater, well water a clean tub. Not runoff off a road, not water standing near where somebody burned or dumped or sprayed, not the puddle by the old machine shed. It costs you nothing to be careful about this, and it is the kind of thing that is very hard to undo once it is done. And one last small thing, since it comes up every time. You will see this plant called mosquito fern, and you will hear that a full mat stops mosquitoes breeding. The name is old, and it comes from people believing exactly that. But I am not going to hand you that as a fact, because the people who have looked at it closely say a mat makes it harder for mosquitoes, and it does not stop them. So do not build one of these expecting it to solve your mosquito problem. Keep it moving, keep it skimmed, and if you want the job done properly, there are better ways to do it. So what does it actually come to? I promised you a number at the start, and I will not dress it up now that we are here. 1 tub, skimmed twice a week through the warm season. What you are looking at is somewhere around 1/10 of your flock's ration replaced with a plant that regrows itself and that you never pay for. 1/10, not all of it. I know what the loud videos say. They say this replaces your feed entirely. It does not, and I am not going to stand here and tell you it does so you will like me better. Here is where the 1/10 comes from. Researchers have fed dried azolla to laying hens at 5% of the diet, at 10%, and at 15%. What they found is that egg production held, egg weight held, shell thickness, yolk color, the eggs came out as good or better right up through 15%, and most of the recommendations settle in around 5 to 10% for steady, everyday use. So a tenth is the number I will stand behind, and there is room above it if you build up slowly and your birds are thriving. Now think about a tenth for a moment before you decide it is small. A tenth of your ration every week for as long as it is warm from a tub behind your barn that you filled once and fed with manure. And it is a tenth that arrives green in the middle of summer when your hens want green. Better yolks, feed you did not carry, a bill that did not come. And the year looks like this. In spring, you set the tub out and float your saved handful. Through the summer, it races, and you skim it twice a week and feed it fresh. In the height of it, you cannot keep up, and that surplus goes onto a screen to dry and into jars. And all winter, when there is nothing green in the world at all, you go to the shelf and you sprinkle summer over their feed. That is not a trick. That is a system. It ran on rainwater and manure and a plant that nobody can sell you. The store was never part of the plan. If you got value out of this, subscribe, and I will keep bringing them. You saw this plant named in the 5 plant video. Now you know how to build it. And if you want the other half of this, the one that stretches the sack you do still have to buy, watch the ferment bucket video next. Those two together are most of what I know about feeding hens for very little. Then tell me in the comments, are you growing Azolla already? Tub, tank, or indoors under a light? And how many days is yours taking to double, because I would truly like to know what it does in your weather. I read every one of them.